I will work everything together for your good. Even this right here, even the grief that you are feeling, your suffering does not compare with the glory I'm going to reveal. And so holding on to that truth is what gave me hope, is what gives me hope in the midst of the waiting, in the midst of the loss, in the midst of the not knowing, is knowing, okay, God, I don't know how you're going to do it. You never promised everything would be good. That is not his promise. But he did promise he'd work it together for our good, because we do love him and we are called according to his purpose. I remember when I was about 20 years old, before all of my kind of madness started, someone gave me a word and they said, the Lord would say to you what he said to Peter. He said, Satan desires to have you that he might sift you like wheat. But I've prayed for you that your faith fail not. And after you've been converted, strengthen the brethren. And then actually it was within that year pretty much that all the stuff started happening that has lasted for kind of decades, you know. And I look back and I remember that word and I'm like, okay, you promised that there was a conversion that was going to happen, a change was going to happen, a redemption would happen, and that I was to strengthen the brethren. And it reminded me of a passage of scripture when I think about this, because, you know, I've gone through, we've talked about it, just relationship failures. You know, I've had my bout of that. And when I was around 17 years old, I challenged myself to memorize a passage of scripture. And the scripture was Romans 8. And it has seemed to be one of those scriptures that has played out in my life. It's been one of my bedrocks. It's been one of my just sources of strength that I go back to and that I measure my life against instead of measuring it against my life. And starting in verse 14, it says, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God, you know. For you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. And it says, the Spirit himself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. Then he said, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. It says, for the creation itself also groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now, and not only they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit. Even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption to wit the redemption of our bodies. And then it says again, we are saved by hope. But hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doeth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities. For we know not what we should pray for as we ought. But the Spirit himself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. And he that searcheth the heart knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren.
I think a lot of times we feel as believers, I know I have, that if we live right, if we live a life of obedience, we can escape having pain, or we'll get all of our prayers answered. And that's just not true. He promised he would be with us. And the thing that we have to understand is, I love to go back to the Hebrew boys who, when they were facing going into the furnace, and they had a choice to bow or be put in the furnace, right? And they were like, you know what? We serve a God who's able to spare us and to deliver us from this furnace. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow. And I think we all have to come to a place of loving God and understanding who he is and knowing that he's faithful if we receive our prayers on this side of heaven or on the other side of heaven.
I've learned, and I'm still learning, that we place our hope in him, even in the midst of loss, even in the midst of, losing my dad, who was just the finest man I've ever known. Loved my mom faithfully for 54 years. He was my model man I could never say all men were, because Dad stood up as a beacon of truth. Well, you can't say it because I love the Lord. I treat women right. I'm faithful. I've never abused you nor your mom. You know, Dad was my rock when it came to that. But Dad went to see Jesus. And now I was experiencing loss, saying, okay, God, what do I do with this right here? You know, and I think I've said it before, because I remember telling the Lord, I've always felt like my dad was my roof of a house. And when I had a spouse, he was like the ceiling, you know, but then when the ceiling was removed, I still had that roof. Wow. But I told the Lord, I said, but now I have no ceiling and I have no roof. And God said, well, if that was your ceiling and that was your roof, then I am the sky. You're never without me covering you, without me seeing you, without me knowing you. And I will work everything together for your good. Even this right here, even the grief that you are feeling, your suffering does not compare with the glory I'm going to reveal. And so holding on to that truth is what gave me hope, is what gives me hope in the midst of the waiting, in the midst of the loss, in the midst of the not knowing, is knowing, okay, God, I don't know how you're going to do it. You never promised everything would be good. That is not his promise. But he did promise he'd work it together for our good, because we do love him and we are called according to his purpose. And so, you know, I don't know if y'all, I'm sure you all have your stories of, you know, you may be experiencing loss, you know, or you may have. And you may have tips on, you know, how you have held on to hope or how you're holding on to hope now, you know. And I know it's not a one and done. It's not because I've gotten through that challenge, I never have to go through anything else. No, every day we're having to hold on to hope. Every day we're having to remind ourselves or be reminded of who he is and what he has already said. But when we put our anchor in what he said, then it keeps us steady. Even in the midst of this right here, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to make it to the shore because he said that I am.
You know, when I was in my 20s, I went through a series of 6 miscarriages. And I knew what the Bible said about suffering, but I don't think I had my own theology. And I had to suddenly kind of start from the bottom up. It was like, who is Jesus now? And we see that with Mary and Martha. Like, they were Jesus's BFFs. They were walking so closely with him. You know, he was trusting them. So they were seeing these miracles. And then when they needed their own miracle, where was Jesus? And there was so much disappointment in that moment and that loss of Lazarus. It's like, who is Jesus now? And I think I went through that own season in my loss. It's like I was waiting and I didn't get what I'd hoped for. And now I'm in a season of grieving. And who is Jesus now? And in that beautiful story, like, Jesus comes, he shows up, he's faithful, and one of the sisters comes out and the other one like needs a minute. She's in the house. The sister's like, hey, Jesus is here, come on. And sometimes it takes a minute, but when we have that face-to-face encounter and we get to put our trust in Jesus again, well, I didn't get the outcome that I wanted. I actually don't even understand. I'm not even going to ask why, because I just don't know where this will even go, but I'm going to trust you, Jesus, that this can be for the greater glory, not just now here on the earth, but actually maybe there might be gaping holes for a while, but one day in eternity, like, everything will make sense and there will be glory and there will be no pain and no suffering and no more loss. And that's worth trusting Jesus for.
At TBN, our mission is to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for helping make the gospel of grace go around the world.
And it's because of you that partner with us that this ministry continues. God bless you.